All right. Looks like we got a good group here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a few housekeeping items first. Thank you all so much for joining us for the Making Decisions in Uncertain Times webinar. We will be recording this webinar, so don't feel like you need to scribble notes down or anything. We will send that out to you in about 24 hours so that you can review that and anything that you might want to go back to after the presentation. You all are on mute right now, so if you have any questions, feel free to put those into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. We would love to hear from you, so any questions or comments you might have, we would love to hear them. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today. So today we have Marge Murphy. Marge is the owner and president of Acadia. She started Acadia about 20 years ago. She has experience in sales and marketing operations and helps clients measure results and activities that help produce a greater ROI. We have Keith Hummel. He is the finance principal at MLA. He brings the perspective of a long career in manufacturing, working for privately held companies. Keith's expertise includes process improvement and operations analysis to help their clients achieve greater efficiencies. Gary Wilkins is the strategic principal for MLA. His work combines a lifelong passion for organizational and team effectiveness with ongoing research and application. Gary also serves as the chair of MLA's Board of Advisors and leads internal initiatives in addition to his work with their clients. And lastly, we have Ken Colvin, who is the solutions principal at MLA. He has worked with a variety of multinational companies and has extensive experience in leadership and supply chain management. He specializes in transforming business processes, significantly impacting operations, productivity, and costs. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Gary to get us started.
All right, well, thank you. Before we run into Gary's slide, let me run in here real quickly, and I want to set the stage today for why we're even doing this webinar, because it's been a lot of fun working with the MLA group. But I think one of the things that was really, inspiring to me was how, Gary and I happened to meet each other in the office building. We work in the same office building, and we met several months ago. And conversation after conversation, I just thought, my gosh, these guys are so darn smart. And they ask the right questions all the time. I know, Gary, you were always asking me questions about my business. So after COVID hit, it was like there were so many things swirling. And again, Gary and I continued the conversation. And I kept thinking about all of the information we were sharing with one another about our clients, about all the questions that they had, all of the things that were coming at us so rapidly. And I realized from a financial perspective, from a sales perspective, from a planning perspective and strategy perspective, all of our clients were really struggling with what do I need to do and who do I rely on to get the right answers. And I look at Gary's team and I thought, you know what? If I put my A team together, I want MLA to be on that A team. I want my bankers, I want my finance people, I want my HR people. I want to have an A team together that's going to help me through this difficult time. And I really wanted to do something to help our clients and really sit and have a webinar that really can impart information that helps us think differently. And Gary's team was really the first to come to mind. So this might not be so much about sales and marketing for the people who know me from my sales and marketing world, but this is really just for leaders, entrepreneurs, and business people who are looking to understand what questions they should be asking and how we should be thinking together as a group. So Gary, I'm going to toss it back to you, and I want to thank you very much for participating in getting this developed, because I think this is really great content and a really good webinar. So thank you, sir.
Well, Marge, thank you so much. I mean, it's exciting for us, very educational for us at MLA. And yeah, Marge and I kind of connected because as I was asking questions, she had similar questions for me, and we both said, these are the questions we're asking our clients. We need to talk more, because thinking from a business development perspective, thinking from a finance and strategy solutions perspective, that was kind of a way that we could sort of connect those two and gain a little perspective on how we're serving our clients and can do that more effectively. So we've got some slides here that we're excited to share with you, and some content. We're going to bring Ken and Keith in on this as well. But you know, we're obviously in some very unprecedented times, and just facing uncertainty in ways that we just had never imagined before. And yeah, we have to keep functioning. We have to continue to do our jobs and to lead the people that are looking to us. And this is just a great way for us to kind of think through how we've been doing that, what we've been seeing from our team, from our clients, and putting that together in a package that we hope will be helpful for you as well. So let me just give a little bit of background on a couple of things here. We think of MLA as a finance and strategy and solutions company. And an analogy that kind of helps pull this together is we talk about it like driving a car, right? A lot of times owning a business or running an organization, leading a team, you want it to be smooth, you want it to be enjoyable, you want it to be comfortable, you want to be able to do it well even while you're thinking about other things. But every now and then you hit something on the road, or something goes wrong mechanically, or there's some issue on the road ahead, and all of a sudden your senses and your awareness just kind of all goes up, and you're trying to figure out how to respond. And so we break this down into three pieces. We think of finance as looking back. It's like the mirrors on the car. Finance is where you look back to get certainty. In the finance world, if it hasn't happened, it isn't real, because it isn't recorded somewhere, there's not a transaction, and that's kind of the pure finance model. But it's a very limited view. Even the financials we prepare, the reports, the statements, we have to read a lot of context into those numbers in order to have a full picture. And that's what running a business is about. It's about having that context, being able to pull that information and make sense of those numbers. So finance is one part of this. Strategy, which is the next component of it, is very much about looking forward into uncertainty. And as you know, when you are on your regular commute back and forth to work, if you're commuting again, or maybe you're still waiting at home thinking about that commute, you know that road, right? You kind of know what to expect, but at the same time, there's a part of you that's always looking ahead. Is there something on the road ahead? Is there some change that I need to address? And so we also need to think about kind of what's the destination we're going to. There's been times where I just get in the car and I'm driving and I'm like, wait, I'm not going where I thought I was. I'm on autopilot going somewhere else, and I need to stop and think, oh, what is my destination? Have I got the right map or the right plan to get there? So that's how we think of strategy in setting that direction. And then the third piece, which we call solutions, is what connects the two. It connects finance, this backward look, with strategy, this forward look, and there's processes and tools. So in a car, you've got your dashboard, your gauges, the steering wheel, the pedals, all of those things. And that's where you have your fingers. That's where you're glancing to get your points of reference. And when you need to make changes, that's where the controls are, to slow things down, to stop, or to change direction. And so those three things work together in this way. And that's how we kind of think about the different components of the services we bring to our clients at MLA. So one of the big challenges we've encountered recently is COVID-19, right? That's the world we're all living in. And this has provided a great opportunity for us, because it's forced us into a very short time horizon. So, you know, usually if you're doing strategic plans, you know, you're thinking out years in advance. We're talking about weeks, and yet the same principles are still working. And so we've seen COVID-19 come up, and immediately, as the impact and the degree of this is starting to unfold, the immediate strategy came to get our hands on these payroll protection funds. And so a lot of activity, a lot of focus, a lot of information right around that. And there was money there, but money with strings attached. And Keith Hummel, who's one of our finance team, was kind of in the middle of all that. So Keith, talk to us a little bit about what that was like from the finance perspective.
Yeah, certainly, Gary. Thank you. And everybody, welcome. Appreciate y'all joining us this afternoon. Gary mentioned, my name is Keith Hummel, one of the finance principals. Yeah, when in this time of uncertainty, when we saw the economic shutdowns occurring, and it seemed like day after day, week after week, more things were coming out of Columbus. Eventually, out of Washington came the SBA loan programs, and in particular the PPP. But even when that was rolled out, very little was known about it at first. It seemed like regulations were being formed and released days and weeks after the application window for the actual loans opened up. And quite frankly, there's been changes within the last week. So there's still a lot of uncertainty in what's going on with this. Throughout that whole time period, MLA helped our clients secure over $4 million of funds, but we had to be learning on the fly. So we weren't immune to the uncertainty ourselves. When we came right through it, the PPP improved clients' cash positions, as Gary mentioned, but there were strings attached. And part of that is what I mentioned already. The regulations weren't even formalized and finalized as the applications were being allowed to be submitted. And what ended up happening is uncertainty actually bred more uncertainty. One of the biggest challenges once we were moving forward is that then there was a need to track the funds and where they were used, and is a forgiveness component to this PPP program. And there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of investigation done to make sure we understand what is required for it. And it's been kind of a moving target. And we have one client, just as an example, they are a nonprofit, and they applied for the funds. They received their funds, and while they were in that process, they received a significant donation that had nothing to do with the COVID crisis. There wasn't any timing related to that, but it created, even amongst the uncertainty of COVID-19 and PPP and all of that, just a decision on what were they going to do. It led them to a 4 to 5 hour long board meeting to put extra scrutiny into this to determine were they going to return the PPP funds, or how do these balance against each other, and required them to truly kind of dig down, dive in, and think things through, to sort through what affects what. Are the PPP funds in this donation, are they actually mutually exclusive events, or do they interrelate, and things like that. So it's, like I said, things are a moving target all along the way. But then I'll turn this over to Ken Colvin. He's our solutions principal, and he's got some input on this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So who would have thought that a nonprofit would be considering returning money? I mean, these are definitely unique circumstances. It makes me think of what said in that Apple ad, the think different theme. In some ways, we are having to figure things out as we go. We're asking probing questions like, so what else are you learning about your business, and what do you have time for? Or questions about now that you hadn't considered before. Time to challenge your approaches and your processes. Things may be breaking that you've never thought of before. You know, who would have thought that most of us would be working remotely, quarantining in our homes for 2 to 3 months, you know, dealing with kids and pets and whatever while we're trying to run businesses. We're facing all kinds of new scenarios, and our business processes weren't set up to support that. These are the kinds of challenges we're facing and we're discussing with our clients, and they're really spawning some really good deeper dives into the questions about the business and the solutions that they need going forward.
Yeah, similarly, I'm just going to chime in here from a sales and marketing perspective. First off, yeah, PPP for all of us as business owners was frantic. I'm going to use the word frantic. It was constant change. Where are we going? What are we doing? And Gary and team, your voice of calm. And I think that's a key element here when we're thinking about all of this. For our clients, from a sales and marketing perspective, we had to be the voice of calm. And you guys, from a financial perspective, had to be the voice of calm, because both of what we're doing at MLA and Acadia affects sales revenue. And when sales revenue gets shaky, or you don't have cash flow and that gets shaky, the whole world starts spinning. It's really, really frightening. It's one of those things of where's the equilibrium here? So I love what Gary said earlier about looking back, looking forward, and proceeding. And when we started getting panicked phone calls about what's going to happen with the pipeline, what if I have a certain industry sector that's going to shut down, and For those of you who know Acadia, we work mainly in the B2B sector with manufacturing clients. So some of them were accelerating because they could make parts for a ventilator. You know, that was fantastic. And we had other companies that, you know, all of a sudden everything was shutting down. You know, a funny industry, cosmetics. Well, you know, packaging for cosmetics, that tanked. Nobody's buying makeup. We're not going to work. Who'd have thunk that, right? So there were nuances, there were things that were going on there. And what we really needed to do was to look back and understand, okay, what happened? But we had to look forward because things were changing rapidly. We had to look at the sales pipeline. We had to consider what industries were growing, what industries were shrinking, and where were the clients and where did they need to pivot to. Trade shows started evaporating. What happens when, you know, you put your marketing budget in going to 7 trade shows and 7 are canceled? How do we get in front of our clients? How do we showcase the brand new manufacturing machine we just made? Okay, video. We have to pivot for video. We have to pivot to webinars. A lot of things changing very quickly, but what was fun about it, and I'm going to use the word fun, was that we created this calm approach by asking questions, by looking at data, and by saying, okay, let's take some baby steps forward. And as we began to answer questions and take baby steps forward and put down small tasks that we could all achieve to achieve a greater goal, confidence started to build and clients began to feel like, okay, our feet are under us. We've got to look at this head on and proceed. So from that perspective, I have to say it was a great experience. It still is a great experience, and we're still walking through it every day. But yeah, there was apprehension for sure, and we had to manage that. And I think, Gary, I'm sure you had some apprehension on your side of the world as well.
Yeah, that's for sure, Marge. We serve 60 some clients in the Southwest Ohio region. We have a dozen or more in other parts of the country, and all of a sudden we're just getting inundated with all these questions and requests. And it was, for me, it was interesting because the clients that I was directly involved with, my role actually didn't have much to do with this particular part of it. And I was able to step back and observe what was happening with our team and how this group of financial professionals with decades of experience from all different kinds of industries were responding. And it was really remarkable because, you know, the questions that were coming out in conversations and video calls we were having as a team were really helpful and really profound. And we just realized, you know, anxiety is always part of decision making. Anytime there's a decision, there's going to be uncertainty. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to make a decision. It's just that we've become so accustomed to reducing that anxiety, we sometimes forget how to function with it when it's not something that we can control directly. And so what we learned early on is the critical step is to create context. Context is the circumstances that are the setting for what you're trying to understand. And it puts it in terms that you can understand. And right from the beginning, there were limits, or there were questions about the context of COVID-19 and what was going to happen with PPP. There was this swirl of information and these changes and people responding and issues with bank portals not working and all of these things coming up. And we had to just drill down and find a few basic things that we could start with and then build out from there. So there's one particular question. In fact, we're going to put this out to you in a poll right now because we found it very helpful to ask, when did you realize COVID-19 was going to affect you? And as you're on this with us, we'd love to just get a quick response from you. Obviously, this is just multiple choice, so you got to pick one of the options there. So Bridget, yeah, I see you've got the poll screen up. If you could just take a minute and walk us through that, and then we'll come back in and talk a little bit about the responses.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here, and then I will share the results with everybody. Looks like a lot of people realized when the governor closed schools and businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that moment clearly as well. That was the time where a lot of people said, oh, this is now affecting either me directly or this is affecting the people that work for me. There are some people who just had a sense, right? As soon as I heard about this, maybe your business has connections to places where this was a hot spot, China, other places beforehand. It's interesting. I put the second one in there because we had a situation with a client. They're actually a provider for a major grocery chain, and they were seeing demand go up and up and up, right? Because people were shopping and stocking up on things, and they were scrambling like crazy, trying to get things staffed and product moved and all this kind of stuff. And our team member walked in and just said, we're gonna have to start putting some measures in place. And this person just was like, what? I'm just trying to run things here. Now you're telling me we're going to have to do something extra about it, right? So until that conversation, he was just responding to the immediate problem. And yet all of a sudden it became clear that this was going to be such a bigger question. It's interesting that nobody can't remember this answer, right? We can all anchor this back to this particular point in time. And that's what's so helpful about asking this question, when, right? It takes us back, and all of a sudden, all of this information and changes and things that have happened and other people's stories and things that have followed on since then, that all tend to kind of flow together in our minds and in our emotions. We can just anchor a point in the midst of that, and it helps us create context. It helps us create some space. And here's the critical thing: creating context helps us see a path forward. All right, so if you look at this image, right, this is a foggy, it's a windy mountain road, and you can't even see what's coming around the next bend. But if you start moving down the road that you can see, that part of the road becomes clearer. And so setting context by asking a question that relates you back to a specific moment in time begins that process for us, and then it opens things up a little bit more from there. Just think of one other anecdote. We have a service industry client, and as I was kind of walking back through this process with him, he realized that his immediate concern was for his team, because his team is made up of older people that have worked in his industry for a long time, and he's built a small firm that's been very competitive because he's been able to draw in these people with a high level of expertise. And so right away he realized, oh, these people are vulnerable. But then he realized, oh my goodness, they have all of this knowledge and expertise that if they get sick or something worse, they can't continue to work. It goes with them. I have not captured that inside my firm and created processes that will let me leverage that and pass that on to the next generation. And so all of a sudden he was talking to us about saying, how do I start repositioning myself now in order to develop younger team members? So just asking him that question, what happened, opened up this other conversation about what was most important to him and the things he needed to start to address going forward.
Gary, that's just an amazing point. And, we have to think all the time about the aging out issue that we're having and how that really is affecting businesses. But, again, it's not until all of a sudden you hit that point, you hit that fork in the road, which we have all been forced into. And it's like, I have to think about this now. It can't be something that I think about tomorrow. So, to that point, creating a plan is really, really important. And we found with our clients that, again, we work very much in the manufacturing industrial space, that creating that plan and getting it down on paper and making it tangible was very, very helpful. So, the first thing we asked them was, what has shifted? Again, what has changed in the business? Has an industry segment gone away? What's happening to your rep network, your distribution channel? How are they being affected? How are logistics being affected, and how product is getting shipped? These are all the things we started talking about. It wasn't even necessarily surrounding sales and marketing, but what has shifted? And then how can you pivot? What are the things that we can optimize? What are the things that can, be reduced? Is there a way we can repurpose certain personnel? So a lot of times it wasn't even a sales and marketing conversation, it was a business conversation, because they needed to speak about these things, and it was important for us to listen and start the whiteboard and just get these thoughts down. When can we get things done? How long is it going to take to shift? And then is there new opportunity here? As I had mentioned earlier, we had some clients who were able to help with COVID by creating PPE equipment, others that could, repurpose what they were doing and create something else. So what new opportunities do we have? We didn't want to just look at lost opportunity, but what new opportunity do we have? And we put together a little graphic here, and it kind of helped us frame priorities and what was important in action steps. So quick example, I know I had mentioned this earlier, trade shows being canceled. So how are we going to get in front of our prospects? Okay, let's do webinars. How long is that going to take us, and how big of a priority was that? How do we showcase equipment? Mentioned this earlier about doing video. Go out on the manufacturing floor, film the process. What's going on in your manufacturing plant? Get a drone in there. Take a video of the facility, be able to show clients and prospective clients what your facility does, how you can do it, how many weeks is that going to take, and what kind of a priority is that? One of the things that became extremely important very, very quickly was the fact that your website is really, really important. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later on. But did we need to get COVID-specific pages generated? What kind of content was required? How important was it to keep your clients informed about what was going on? If you were maybe having shipping issues, something was going on with manufacturing that was going to slow up the process for a bit. So putting blog content together, putting news pages up, and keeping their clients informed was extremely important. But a lot of times these things were not considered, and they had to be done quickly, and they needed to know that they had the ability to trust us to help guide them through it by asking the right subject matter experts within their organizations, getting their content put together, and then getting that presented in a meaningful manner. But again, it was stopping for a minute. We couldn't stop for a long time because we had to pivot, but getting down these key points. And then once we put them into a format such as you're seeing here, they became tangible, they became executable, and we knew who was responsible and how we were going to get things done. And it's been a very good process, and we're sticking to it. But I think we're going to shift over to Keith from a finance perspective. What did you guys do, and what did it look like from your point of view?
Marge, that's a great question. Thank you. From a finance perspective and the sorts of things that we're looking at, what we want to be doing is helping our clients and team members to create margin in their thinking. And in this context, margin is not the financial term of revenue less cost, but rather it's think of it as being breathing room or time to think. And in times of uncertainty expands by casting doubt on what we thought we knew. So in those times of uncertainty, what we want to be doing is looking for what do we know that is certain? How do we find that? And this, in the finance perspective, means to look at what you know to be true, which is your financials. And as was referenced in an analogy earlier today, is looking in the rearview mirror. In your financials, they need to be up to date. They need to be reliable. And once you've got that, this provides a stable base to stand on. Think of standing on a wobbly rock trying to cross a stream. If you've got sure footing, you've got more certainty that you're going to be able to get across without getting your feet wet. But things a little wobbly, you're not so positive of that because you're uncertain what's happening. So when you've got your financials in line and you've got them up to date, they provide the stability from which you can use as kind of a jump off point. And so the whole purpose here is to create margin in our thinking. Once you know you're good on your financials historically, so you know, and up to date, so you know where you are right now, well, now you can take a deep breath and start yourself moving forward. So you want to be understanding and looking at where are you getting your information. And another question you need to be asking here is, how is my business doing? So where do I get my data? What data do I already have? In the context of COVID, because of all the different things going on, your team may have had extra time on their hands to be able to go a step further and look into detailed reports instead of summaries to kind of drill down into things. But what you want to be doing is once you've got your sure footing, kind of expanding out from there. And a great example of this is all the activity that's occurred around the PPP process, particularly in regards to forgiveness, because tracking of your expenses and qualifying for that forgiveness is a critical part of the loan program. Yeah, obviously it is a loan program, so there's a fallback there as far as the low interest rate and the time to pay it back if you don't qualify for or don't meet the forgiveness criteria. But ideally you would, because it's payroll, it's expenses, things like that. So one of the odd things here is, though, as mentioned earlier, the forgiveness criteria and the timetables are still in flux. They just changed in the past week. However, the practices that should be in place for as far as where the data is coming from, because you're pulling it from your financials and the financial processes that wouldn't necessarily change. It's just thinking through, taking that breath to go, okay, wait a minute. What do I need to track? I need to be keeping track of when cash goes out for my payroll. I need to be keeping track of when cash goes out for my taxes. I need to be keeping track of when the actual payments are made for my leases or my mortgage interest. All the different things that are qualifiable expenses to get forgiveness of PPP. Those are things that, when you stop and think about it, well, they're being done all the time. And they have been being done in the past, they will be going forward. But honestly, in our clients, we saw that as a huge area of concern, because everyone was concerned they might not do it right. When in reality, if you stop to think about it, there's nothing to really get wrong because you're already doing it. There's another question that we've been asking our clients that was a good cue here that we want to put out as a poll question to all of you. And that was, what was the first thing you did in response to COVID-19?
And Keith, while folks are answering that poll, I just want to, reiterate what you said. It was so important, to understand your financials. And if not for nothing, if you didn't feel like you had a grasp on them after going through that PPP process, you surely did, because we were neck deep in making sure that we had everything lined up appropriately. And so many of the business owners that I know were doing the same thing. And again, it was guidance from folks like the MLA team that really helped get us through those trying moments. And we're still going through them.
Absolutely. While the poll is up here, I just want to state, like with all of these poll questions, there is no right or wrong answers. So no one's going to be graded here. Your response could mean that you had complete confidence in other areas, but not the one where we were looking at. All right.
All right, so our results, and it looks like a lot of people had a team meeting was the first thing that they did. And we did have some people that said other. So if that was you, we'd love to hear in the chat what that first thing was that you did.
Yes, great. Thank you, Bridget, for pointing that out. Wonderful. So as we look at these results here, people had a team meeting, which is fantastic. Lincoln always suggested that the best thing to do is surround yourself with people that are smarter than ourselves and listen to them. So bringing your team together is a fantastic first idea. One of the things you potentially might have come into there is what information did you have or not have, or maybe the purpose of the meeting was to discuss that exact point and figure out what information do we have to get. In contacting customers, and a lot of these are steps that we'll talk about here a little bit more in depth, but we could be looking to see and this is the responses we got from our own internal clients. They were wanting to see if there were going to be changes in demand, and what options do they have and how dependent upon them are they. Key suppliers, you want to know if they're being affected, because if you're, or what changes they're going to have. Obviously, if you run into supply issues, even if your demand for your product or service is unaffected or minimally affected, you will be affected from the other side. And wanting to know then in those circumstances, how quickly can they respond? Financial status, kind of what we were talking about a little bit earlier. How are you feeling about your results? How are you feeling about where you're at? And how well are you positioned moving forward? Makes that kind of is an intro to the question of, do we even need to apply for PPP funds? That's one of the first questions that we asked when that came up. And then calling family and friends, to check in. There's the emotional toll that came into all of this. But where we want to take this is, from all this, there's several different questions, and this leads back to what Marge said earlier, that we want to create a sense of calm, and asking the right questions can create context. But then there's what do you do with the information from the questions, from the results, from the responses to those questions. So as we move to the next slide, we want to be looking at, what is it that I need to watch the closest? And what I want to put forth here is that, once we know where we are, the next step is to answer that question: what's going to happen to my business? And this connects to, what do I need to watch the closest? There's another aspect of uncertainty here, and a key area to develop context as these two kind of come together. Most uncertainty, if you think about it, comes from outside forces, which we don't have control over. Yeah, there can be internal things that you're uncertain of. But when you think about it, if it's, are your employees coming to work, or that's actually an external thing that affects your internal business. So getting insight into those external forces helps put them in context for your business. Once you got your feet firmly planted for what you know internally, then the types of questions that we want to be asking, and we have been asking, and delve further into them, they lead to expanding one's level of certainty by gaining a perspective on what's going on the outside that's affecting your business. So the crux of this question, both these questions, what is happening, what's going to happen to my business, or what do I need to watch the closest, is cash. There's an old phrase in finance and accounting that cash is king. And this is what you need to watch the closest. You've got customer receivables to collect to provide cash inflow. You've got employees, payroll, and vendors to pay. You need to make sure you have cash available to make those payments, as well as rent and mortgage and taxes, etc., things like that. So getting input from those sources, as in the questions in the poll that we just took, provides information for building certainty on what's going to happen around your cash and your cash position. In regards to this, PPP helps here because it's providing a short-term coverage for payroll and some other expenses, but it isn't a save-all. In conjunction with PPP tracking, as we talked earlier, we're forced to look at cash outflows. The two are one and the same, such as payroll and overhead expenses. We have a client, as an anecdote here, that it's a real estate organization. And the MLA team had worked very hard with this company in the months preceding the COVID crisis and the economic shutdowns to get all of their mortgage payments set up on an auto pay. So they were kind of unnecessary to be watched. They're known, they're fixed, they occur regularly, same period of time. So instead of spending a lot of time having to deal with them, the thought process prior to COVID-19 was to have them on auto pay. As soon as COVID-19 came and the uncertainty around everything going on began to hit and to grow and expand, the decision was made to turn all those auto pays off immediately. And that was done based upon trying to gain control over what's going on with cash. So in uncertain times, look at what you know and what you can control, because that's where you can have certainty, as opposed to when you're dealing with the outside forces that you can't control. In this instance, like I said, they wanted to maintain cash control until at least there was a higher level of certainty available.
Absolutely, Keith. It's so funny when you talk about that. It's like cash flow is important, and for our clients, lead flow is important. So It's understanding where are the leads coming from and how is this going to happen. So for us, it was really helping our clients understand the flow of what's going to happen now with sales leads and sales pipeline. So we really needed to understand the numbers. So the very first thing we wanted to do was find out, okay, how much revenue are you going to lose? How much revenue are you going to have to make up? Can you project that? And what is your average sale? How many prospects become a lead and how many leads result in a new client? It was these kinds of conversion questions, very much like a cash flow. What's coming in and what's going out, guys? And how are we going to figure out how to buffer that pipeline? Very, very important questions, and yet things were shifting, So the conversions that we knew historically might not be the conversions that we're seeing now. For instance, one of the statistics we saw with many clients was that email conversion was going down. We were getting so many emails about COVID, people couldn't process enough emails, it was getting crazy. So email interface was decreasing, and yet phone conversations were going up. Now, if you have a CRM and a marketing automation tool that can help you analyze this, it's a very easy thing to do. You go in and you can see the activity and you can chart and you can measure like you see here. We can see conversion rates and activities. If you didn't have a CRM or a marketing automation tool in place, we could still figure it out. And it was just, let's think about the basics. I want you guys to start looking at how many people are responding to your emails as opposed to picking up the phone. I don't even care if you have a little check box with a piece of paper next to you. Just start to chart what's going on. Let's look at a handful of recent engagements. Let's take a look at what we're seeing now, and let's come up with some new ideas, and let's make some good educated assumptions. So things actually could work well, whether we had some automation behind it or whether we were just doing this by gut instinct. But we had to start to look at the numbers. Just like you can't ignore your cash flow, you can't ignore your sales flow. So looking at that was really important. And then the next thing that we started to do was understanding a little bit more about the sales process. What was the sales process? What was going on? And it was really, really interesting with one client in particular, when we asked these questions, what are my sales stages? How does the sale flow through the pipeline? What are the criteria for progressing an opportunity from one stage to the next? And do we have any log jams? Is there anything along that progression that we see is cramming up? And with one client in particular, it was really, really interesting. We did a quick analysis and they had one product that they actually could sell in a relatively short sales cycle. Now I know everybody's saying, who the heck is selling anything during COVID? But the fact of the matter was this was going to help fill the gap with some of the trade show issues that were going away. And we knew that, and we were able to get some content together pretty quickly. We put a campaign together that included some emails and some outbound calling. And we were able to see within 4 to 5 weeks that they were getting opportunities in that pipeline, and they've now started to close some of those. So by looking at the process, we could see some areas where we could get short sales, quick sales in a short amount of time. So knowing the process was really, really helpful. So Ken, I'm going to hand this over to you now, because talking about information, it's critical to us and how we were able to help clients. And I think you also agree that information is really important, but you got to know the full story.
Yeah, you're right, Marge. You're speaking my language when you talk about the processes, because that's really the area that we like to focus on when we look at our solutions. But before I respond to that, I just want to take a second to reemphasize the importance of having margin to be able to work on the plans for the near and the long term. Distractions like what we have right now will inhibit your ability to assess information, to see things in the data, trends, or to explore new processes and think outside the box. An example comes to mind of a company that we work with that provides engineering services, and he knows he should be planning and he wants to be doing the planning, but he's deeply involved in the daily operations, and that's holding him back. Having that margin is essential to be able to do the planning. So once you have that breathing room, you can focus on what's happening operationally and in the market. A few questions keep coming up with our clients. as we're talking them through this. They're asking, you know, is what I'm doing working? They've made changes. They need to look at the results. They need to measure the results. Some of them make changes and you know, they don't know what the results and our expectations being met. Tweaks or more changes may be necessary. You have to establish metrics around those changes. You can't guarantee the outcome, but you'll have something to measure against, and you'll be able to validate your expectations, or that more must be done. More changes are on the horizon. The next is the million-dollar question. Everybody wants to know what's going to happen next. You know, what will business look like? What will the market or industry look like in 3 to 6 months? No one can tell you that with any certainty. I'd be foolish to try, but there are some things you can do, and I think with some effort, you can uncover opportunities within your company and within the market. So let's take a look at another poll question and see what you think is going on as far as opportunities for yourself. While you're doing that, feel free to, anytime you have any questions that have come up during any of the presentations, feel free to chat them, and Bridget will take care of those, and we'll have a little Q&A at the end of the webinar.
All right, it looks like, sorry, Marge, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Go ahead, Bridget. Get the poll question. I'll ask Ken a question in a minute.
So it looks like coming out of COVID-19, everyone is looking to move into new products or services, or at least a good majority, 2/3 of people. Okay.
Well, no surprise. This pretty much aligns with what the information we've been getting from most of our clients. So let's talk about moving into new products or services. You know, one of the things that you really need to assess is, what are your customers doing? What adjustments have your customers made? You have to know what they're doing. Have they surprised you with something they're doing? You know, how they surprised you? Why did that surprise you? Are your customers looking for something different or additional from you? And how would you know that? How will you find out? You can't assume that you know based on long-term relationships or your industry knowledge or market knowledge. You need to ask. I think Marge has already talked about that, and this is one of the key things that we do. We ask. You know, the 3 questions that Gary mentioned are great starters, and as you engage in these conversations, you're going to find that you can uncover a need that you can possibly fill, or connect them with someone that can fill that need that they have. Either way, it's a win for you and your relationship with your customer and your understanding of what you might do as far as new products or services. I think the second one was moving into markets and channels. You know, what are your competitors doing? Certainly you should be able to know whether you're gaining or losing business, but you know, have they changed their marketing strategy, or are they offering new products? Are there maybe growth opportunities that you should explore? Now's a great time to do that. While others may be kind of frozen by the uncertainty, these new opportunities could be something that you can look at with maybe your own team, or bring some people in to take a look at it with you and see what that might turn into. The pandemic has certainly disrupted sales channels and supply chains, disrupted industries, whole industries, creating new potential customers, you know, resulting in new demand. You know, one example that I've heard about is, you know, I think Margie talked about a packaging client in cosmetics, but, you know, if you look at the food processing industry, where maybe they were supplying things in bulk to restaurants and things, and it, you know, shift to people cooking meals at home. And so, you know, there's a whole different demand coming there for smaller packaging and smaller quantities. And, you know, there are things like that could create great opportunities. there will be pent-up demand. So you got to be ready for that. When things open back up, some things are going to return the way they were. Got to be prepared for that. And of course, look at your adjacent industries or markets that may be attractive, but you've never pursued them before. As long as there are possibilities for you, you should take a look at those, especially when they dovetail in with what your core competencies are. I'm going to jump to talking about can't see any opportunities. We had a response there. You know, that's okay, but you really shouldn't be satisfied with that. You need to consult with maybe some outside people. Find someone who can talk to you who sees things differently than you. Those outside eyes can see opportunities that you're missing and really tune you into some potential benefits that you're missing.
And I'm going to jump in and comment to that one really quickly, because this is something that I dealt with just this morning myself. So we're part of a WBE organization, and I had another WBE reach out to me, and she said, I would like to combine some services that you have and services that I provide to package it up to make a new product. So if you're not seeing an opportunity by yourself, is there an opportunity with another organization to partner and do something together? Just a thought. Yeah,
Marge, you just prompted something in my mind too. You know, there may be companies in your industry that this is a reality check, right? They're thinking about what to do about their company. We have conversations with clients on that very subject. They could be your competitor. They could be someone in an adjacent space like you're talking about. They could be a potential acquisition. So yeah, you got to think outside the box and really kind of explore what everyone's going through. You know, what's happening to you is your best insight of what may be happening to them. And you might need to be a little vulnerable to start those kind of conversations, but it could really open up into some opportunities. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yep. So we're running tight to time here because we love talking about what we do. So we are at 2:23. I know we have a couple of other slides, but Bridget, I'm going to ask you, should we, or Gary, should we skip to the Q&A? Or Gary, do you just want to wrap it up with maybe some thoughts about, you know, MLA? I know I had a process I wanted to talk about, and I know you have a process, but I think questioning is the key here, sir. Could I just quickly, this is Ken, could I just quickly kind of wrap up my piece with, you know, remember that you'll never have enough information to remove all doubt. Don't be addicted to finding that certainty, that absolute. There will be doubts, there always are. You need to understand the difference between reasonable doubts and possible doubts. Reasonable doubts are grounded in evidence. You can see data, you can see trends. Possible doubts are largely what ifs and the product of our imagination. Don't get caught up in those possible doubts. Focus on what's reasonable, and you'll be able to move forward and make decisions with confidence. I just want to leave that with you.
Sure. Yeah, and you know, at MLA, we describe ourselves as business redeemed. That's kind of the phrase we use to talk about what we do, and that's a process of questioning. You can go to our website and see we have kind of 7 categories of questions that we ask, and that's what kind of drives this through. Because we believe business owners are making a promise to their employees, their customers, the vendors that sell to them. All of these pieces together come together, and we have a responsibility to help business owners fulfill that promise by growing their business and by serving those people well. And uncertainty is always a part of business. It's never gone away. It's just that we're in this new place right now where all of a sudden there's a new frame put on it. And yet we've just been, it's encouraged us, because by kind of going back to our basics, we've seen how just a simple process of asking the right questions can really open up some ideas and some very fruitful conversations. And we're excited about some of the things that are coming out of it. There's still a lot of uncertainty. a great deal of pain and suffering that people are experiencing from this. But lives are going to be changed by businesses that come out of this stronger, and businesses that make better opportunities, and owners that are willing to make those hard decisions and move forward. So we believe very much in what we're doing, and are just grateful for this opportunity to share some of that with you as well. So yeah, if there are some questions, some wrap-up information, we're close to our time. So let's go right to that.
Absolutely. So Bridget, I know you've been monitoring the chat pane. So is there anything in particular that has been asked during the course of this webinar?
Yeah, I do have a few here, and if anybody else has any others, feel free to put them in there while we're going through these first ones. So really open to anybody that wants to chime in on this one, but how do you know if you aren't asking the right questions? Are there any indicators of that you're not getting to the root problem of something, or you're not able to make a decision?
Yeah, that's tough, because it's funny, as I was thinking through this, Simon Sinek's book, right, Start With Why, has kind of been banging around my head, and that's great, but it assumes a context where you can separate yourself, where you can step back and look at big themes over time, right? But when we're in a situation where there's constant upheaval, we need something to anchor us down. And I often, if I can't think of an answer to the question immediately in my situation, I start refining the question and asking it in a way that really makes that person the expert. So I can't ask, well, what's the right way to do this? Well, there might be a right way, there might be a wrong way. Instead, I ask, well, what do you remember about, or why do you think you decided to do this? And that makes that person the expert. They're the only one who can really speak to that. So it takes work. There's some great resources out there on how to develop good questions, but they're very valuable in doing any kind of work like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Gary, I might add you to really focus on what are the outcome you're trying to get to. If the question isn't leading you toward that outcome, that direction that you've got set in your plan, then you're probably asking the wrong question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great perspective as well. Yeah, it takes practice. You just got to take a risk. You got to break the sound barrier, and it's like a relationship. It's like talking with your kids. It's anything. You've got to just kind of be willing to try and learn from that, and don't be afraid that you're going to get stuck. You can always say, you know what, I just need to think this through a little more. Can I come back to you when I have a clearer idea of what I need to ask you? And almost always the person will give you permission to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you all for those answers. We'll take one more here before we do a couple wrap-ups. But what do you anticipate of more PPP changes? For example, rules did not forbid small public companies. Then they did. Many employers brought people back to meet initial deadlines, and now the deadline is extended.
Yeah, there's the big question, and we have pages of stuff that we've collected throughout this process, as I'm sure many of you have. There's been a few themes that have resurfaced consistently, and that is that the original intent of the law has generally been upheld. So there's been questions that have come up that seem to threaten that, but when the new clarification comes out, the sense is that this is not based on anything other than historic payroll, and that's the basis of going forward. So if there's consistency between the last 12 months for your application and how you're going forward, that's the best place to be. Short question. We'd love to talk more offline if you have specific questions on that. Feel free to reach out to us. Contact information is on the screen. But yeah, that's what's got everybody lying awake at night and browsing along the line to try to find those answers.
Yeah, by all means, by all means.
Great. Well, I think with that, we will wrap it up. So as mentioned, all the contact information is on the screen right now, so feel free to reach out if there are any other questions. We will reach out to you all if there are any that we missed. We will send out the slide deck and the recording here within the next 24 hours if you have anything else. So thank you all so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks all. Have a great
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate you joining us. Thanks a lot.